the research and reporting analyst for the TAMU ARC grant. So today we're going to be going over some of Excel's functionalities that help you analyze and present data. Here. So some of the things that we're going to talk about, just first off, talk a little bit about statistics in general, right? Some of its applications, why it's important. You all should have received a data set. There's an Excel worksheet that you should have received if you registered for the workshop. So we're going to be working with that data set. We're going to get some hands-on practice with these functions here. And so I'll talk a little bit about how I got that data set. That might help you out if you're interested in getting a little bit more data and getting to practice on different things. So we'll talk about the data as well. And these here are going to be the main things that we're going to cover. Right? So pivot tables are going to be really important. I'm going to use those pretty much throughout the entire presentation. So pivot tables, just a very basic functionality that makes working with Excel a lot easier. We're going to work with the analysis tool pack, which is provided in your version of Excel that you have here through the university. It has a lot of different functions that help you work with statistics on Excel. We're going to work with Excel's new lookup function, which is replacing a couple of older lookup functions that they had. It's basically taking the place of two different functions. And we'll finish off talking a little bit about analysis of variance, a statistical technique that is very useful for a lot of different applications. Right? So first off, what is statistics? And it sounds kind of weird to ask it that way. Statistics sounds like it's plural, but statistics in singular could also mean the science of collecting, presenting, analyzing, and interpreting data. Right, and as I'm pretty sure all of you know by now, data is really everywhere. The first things that probably come to mind are things like Google, Microsoft, Amazon, right? All of those big companies are collecting data about everything you do on their services all the time. But that's not it, right? Data is really is everywhere. And so that means that being able to analyze and interpret that data is important and has applications in all fields. Right, a couple of examples, we're just getting out of a global pandemic, and we couldn't have gotten out of that without the use of data, right? Analyzing how COVID spread, how contagious it was, what things, the ways that it spread, right? It helped us understand how we could fight it. Myself, as a data analyst in education, right, one of the things that I have to do is measure how different programs that we have running improve student success, right? So we don't want to be wasting money on programs that don't do anything for the students, right? So being able to get that data, analyze it, and make decisions from the data is very important. Engineers are always testing the designs that they make before they go into production, right? Because a company doesn't want to put out a product that is going to fail and lose a lot of money. And what's going to be really the focus for today is going to be the business side. So businesses are always trying to learn about their customers. They're always trying to cut corners, right, wherever they can, and trying to make the most efficient use of their money as possible, right? So the data set that we're going to be working today with is going to be like a business data set. And so Excel has different functionalities that help you perform these kinds of tasks, and all built in that make it a lot easier for you, depending on what data you're working with. Right? So if you all can make sure you get that data set out that you got in your email, we're going to be working with that data set. A little bit about it, I got it from Kaggle, which is a website. It's a community of data scientists and machine learners. And here you can find data, you can upload data and find code and upload code. It's a very interesting community. There's a lot of resources there for you. So if maybe you want to practice the skills that you get here today, or any other skills that you're learning in your classes on different data sets, you can go to Kaggle and find a lot of interesting things there. It could be made up data, or sometimes there's even data sets from actual businesses and government agencies. So it's a really cool resource. The data set that we're going to be working with today is a made-up data set on sales, pizza sales by a pizza restaurant. Right? So I got that data set, and the first thing I did was just clean it up a little bit. That's always going to be one of the first things you do whenever you're working with data is just make it work for whatever you want to do, right? So one of the things with that data set that you can see on it is the column with pizza ID, right? It tells you the topping style for the pizza that was ordered, as well as the size. It's more useful for us if we have those two separate, right? So we can work with pizza toppings and we can work with pizza size separately. So I separated those two for you so that we can work with it a little more easily. And so that's always going to be just one aspect of working with data that we're always going to see, right? And I left a link to access this data set on this presentation in case you want to access it later on as well. You should also have this presentation. So that is there for you. So we're going to start off with pivot tables. So pivot tables, they allow you to present data, to summarize and do some basic calculations with the data that you have. They make it very easy for you to do all these things without having to make an individual function somewhere on your worksheet, right? If you want to find the sum of, let's say, a column or an average, you can do all of these things with pivot tables really easily. So I made some questions that we could come up about the data that we have to guide the examples that we're going to be working with here, right? So for example, one question that you may have about your pizza sales is what are the 5 most popular toppings, right? Maybe you want to know what ingredients you have to stock up on, right? So in order to do this, right, we can use a pivot table to find this out. So let's switch over to our Excel sheet. And so here we have the data. You should be looking at the same screen. We have the pizza toppings and the pizza size, how many pizzas were sold, right? The order ID tells you, right, what order it was, right? This is order number 1. We can see that order number 2 asked for a lot more pizzas than order number 1, right? It actually got a few pizzas, 1 of each of these pizzas, right? We can see that sometimes we have, let's see, all of these are 1s here, but there's a couple of 2s and 3s elsewhere. Right, so we have a 3 down here on row 185, right? That tells us that for order number 78, right, they ordered 3 large spicy Italian pizzas, right? So that's how we're interpreting this data, right? That's how we understand the data that we have. So let's answer the question that we have, right? What are the 5 most popular toppings? So let's try to answer that question with a pivot table. All right, so the pivot table, like I said, is going to help you summarize, present, and do a couple calculations with your data. In order to use pivot tables, we're going to go over to Insert, and we have here Pivot Table. We're just going to click on that, and we're going to get this command prompt here, and we're going to have to give it the range, right? So what's the data that we want to use in this pivot table, right? So we're going to select all of the data that we have. So here we can use Shift and Control to select all of our data. Right? You can see it's a lot of data. We have like 48,600 rows. Right? So it's a lot of data. You don't want to be working with all of this by hand. Right? So the pivot table is going to help us out with that. And so I selected all of my data. All of that data is going to be part of your pivot table. Right? So now I'm going to go to existing worksheet so that I can output this pivot table on this worksheet. And for the output, right? For output, I'm going to select this cell over here. Just make sure you have some space, right, around your table here because it's going to generate a table. So you want to have space around the cell where you're making your pivot table, right? So here, I'm just going to press OK. And we don't have a table yet, but now you should be able to see this window here where we have all of the labels for our columns, right? And we can choose to include whichever pieces of information from our data that we want in this pivot table. All right, so for example, we're looking for the 5 most popular pizza toppings, right? So let me put the pizza topping label down into my rows. So now we can see the table already generated all the pizza toppings in a row for the table, right? Doesn't really look like a table yet because we only have one entry for each row, right? So let's see, what are we looking for, right? The most popular toppings. So we need to know how much of each of these toppings were sold, right? How many pizzas for each of these toppings were sold? Which piece of information gives us that here, right? It's going to be the quantity, right? The quantity tells us how many of each of those pizzas were sold. So I'm going to drag quantity and put that under values, right? You can see that immediately the first thing that it gives me is the sum of quantity, right? So that means for this entry here, barbecue chicken, for this topping, if you add every time barbecue chicken comes out here and you add all the quantities for that, so usually we can see they're mostly ones, but there's a couple twos, threes, and so on. If you add all the quantities for the barbecue chicken topping, this is how many barbecue chicken pizzas are sold, right? So this pivot table went ahead and did all of that for you, right? You didn't have to make a function over here, put some, and go through this and get the pizza toppings, right? The pivot table does it all for you. So it's a very useful technique to get things done really quickly. Now, we want to see which of them are the most popular, right? We could go through this and just look at the numbers and grab the highest numbers. But the pivot table can actually do that for us by filtering. So we're going to go to the row labels, right? Because we're interested in the toppings. So that's my rows. And I'm going to click on this little drop down here, and we can see we can add filters for a lot of different things, right? So for example, I want to know which are the most popular, right? So I'm going to go by the sum of quantity that I have here. And that means that I need to go to the value filters, right? That means these are the filters for the values that we're using, right? In this case, the sum of quantity. At the very bottom, we have the option for top 10, right? So I'm going to click there, and I can choose, I want to see the top 10, or I can go down and make this just 5. And bam, I have the top 5 pizza toppings, right? All of that with just a few clicks, right? We didn't have to do any typing, right? Well, except maybe just selecting your data. That was probably the hardest part of this whole thing, right? Just highlighting all the data. Okay, yeah, so it's just a quick trick here. If you use Control and the arrow keys, right, it takes you to the next cell where, well, the last cell where there's something in it, right? So for example, I click Control down, and it'll take me all the way to the bottom, right? If I click Control right, it'll take me all the way to the end of this table, right? And if I click it again, it's just going to take me all the way to the end, right? So you can use that to go quickly through the data. And if you hold Shift, that selects it. So using Control Shift, you can go through the entire thing and just select it really quick. Any other questions here? So far, so good? If I go too fast over anything, let me know and I'll go back. We're not going to use a presentation too much so that we can actually do this ourselves, but I try to make it as detailed as possible. If you want to go back to the presentation later on, if there's anything you didn't understand very well, there's a lot of details in the presentation to guide you step by step through all the things that we're doing here right now. Yeah. So that answers the first thing, right? We have, these are the top 5 most popular pizza toppings for this pizza restaurant, right? So we can also ask, well, what if we want the top 5 pizza toppings, but we want to filter it by size, right? Let's say we want, what are the best selling large pizzas, or what are the best selling medium pizzas or small pizzas? We can go back to our pivot table and we can get more information, right? So right now we're only using the pizza toppings and the quantity, right? But we have a lot more information about these sales here, and we can use that information, right? So let's say we want to know what are the most popular pizza toppings by size, right? So then we can see that one of our options here for the pivot table is going to be filters, right? So we can drag the pizza size label and bring it down into filters, right? That Notice everything here stayed the same so far. We still have the pizza toppings by row, and the values are still the quantity, right? But now we have this filter up here that we can choose the pizza size, right? So right now it's for all, right? So it's not filtering anything. But let's say we want to know what are the medium pizzas, the most popular medium pizzas. So I put medium here, okay? And you see a couple of these changed, right? Now we have barbecue chicken, Cali chicken, classic, Italian supreme, pepperoni. A couple of them are the same, but a couple changed, right? And these are now the numbers for these toppings for a medium pizza, right? So these are the most popular toppings for the medium pizzas. So you can answer a lot of different questions, right, with a pivot table. These are just some examples. Any interesting questions that you may have about your data, you can do a lot of it with pivot tables, right? And so that made it very easy. We didn't have to do any calculations ourselves. Didn't have to type in any different functions. The pivot table has a lot of things like that that make it easier for you to just do all of this work without doing a lot of work, right? And it's great for presenting information, right? Because if you're a data analyst for this pizza restaurant and your boss wants to know what are the most popular pizza toppings, right? You give it to him really quick in a really presentable and easy to read manner using these pivot tables. Any questions so far? All right, great. So let's switch back to our presentation. So we saw the pivot table. Got our large, medium, small, right? So if you went through the pivot table and used the different filters, for the 5 that you would get for the large pizza, 5 for the medium pizza, 5 for the small pizza. A couple of them are the same, but there's a few differences in there, right? All right. So now we're going to move on to the analysis toolpack. So first off, just a quick note. So this is an Excel add-in that has a lot of different tools for you to do statistical analysis on your data. All right. You might not have it loaded in on your Excel just yet. If you do, it'll look like this, right? So everybody go to your data tab. So at the top there on Excel, go to data. And you should see a group that says analysis, right? So that group that says analysis, you should have data analysis there at the top. If you don't worry, we're gonna go through how to load this tool pack right for the first time. And once you load it in, then you should have it available to you afterwards, right? And that's where you're gonna find it, right? So if you don't have it, let's load it in first. So first off, you go to File, and File at the very top, and under File, you're gonna go to Options. So you go to File at the very top left, go to Options, and you should see a section that says Add-ins. Add-ins right there on the left. You're going to go to Add-ins, you're going to highlight the Analysis Tool Pack, and you're going to go to Go at the bottom. After that, you should see, it should give you a couple different options. You're going to select Analysis Tool Pack, and you're going to click OK. And that should load the Analysis Tool Pack for you. So before I move on, was everybody able to do that? Anybody have any questions? Yes. So File, Options at the very bottom, Add-ins here on the left, analysis tool pack, right? You hit go down here at the bottom, and the analysis tool pack is right there. You click OK, and that should load it for you. Anybody else have any questions on that? Everybody figure that out? All right. So let's take a look at that, at some of the things that we can do with this tool pack. So one of the more basic things that very common things that you want to know about data usually going to fall under this descriptive statistics. Right, so this gives you a lot of summary data, summary information about your data, right? So this tool can give you, right, the mean, right, which is the average, the median, both very important tools when working with data. It'll give you the standard deviation. It'll tell you whether your data is skewed. It can give you minimum and maximum of your data and confidence interval, right? Confidence interval tells you where your mean, right? An interval where you can find your mean, right? All of it, very important information that is often requested for whenever you're working with data. So one of the things that we may want to know about this data, right? Another guiding question here is, well, what is the average number of pizzas that are sold in every order, right? If you want to know, let's say an oven makes 2 pizzas at a time, you want to know, well, how many pizzas get ordered usually so that I can know how many ovens am I going to need in order to keep this business running, right? So we can check what is the average number of pizzas sold per order. So we're going to start off by making a pivot table that is going to help us gather the data that we need. Right? So let's switch back over to Excel. So here we're going to, so that we're not working, we don't get too crowded here, let's go to the next page here on our worksheet. So we go to the next sheet, and I already have the question up here for you. How many pizzas are sold per order, right, on average? So we need to know how many pizzas were sold in each order, right? If we look at the data that we have, it tells us, right, in order number 2, right, they ordered 1 of this topping, 1 of this topping, 1 of this topping, and so on, right? But we don't really care about the toppings right now. We just want to know how many pizzas were sold in each order. So let's make a pivot table to try to get that information. Let me zoom in a little bit again here. Good. All right, so again, we're going to insert a pivot table the same way we did before. We're going to get our range again. So we're going to go back to that data that we have. We're going to, in here, select again all of the data. So Control Shift right, and then Control Shift down. That selects all of our data for us. Our location, right, where we're going to output this data, we're going to choose existing worksheet, right, and I'm choosing this cell down here just to give my table a little bit of space. So click OK. Oh, I accidentally put the output cell twice. Let me just click it once. There you go. And it forms my pivot table now here in this second worksheet. So here we want to know for each order, how many pizzas did we sell, right? So we're going to need our label of the order ID. Right? We're interested in each order, right? So my rows now are going to be the orders, right? So order number 1, number 2, number 3, and so on. We want to know how many pizzas we sold for each of those orders. So what we want our pivot table to do, right, is sum the quantity for each of these orders, right? So in values, I'm going to add the quantity. That gives me this pivot table with the rows are the order ID, right? So this is order number 1. Order number 1 ordered 1 pizza. You can go back and check and see that that is right. At an order number 1, we sold 1 pizza. Order number 2 sold 5 pizzas. And we can go back and see, well, order number 2 had one of these, one of these, one of these, one of these, and one of these. That is 5 pizzas, right? So the pivot table did all of that for us. For each order, it summed all of those quantities, and now we have how many pizzas were sold for each order. Make sense? So we want to know the average of these sales, right? We want to know, on average, how many pizzas are these people buying so that I can get the appropriate number of ovens and not have too many ovens that I'm not using and not have too little ovens that I can't make enough pizzas, right? So I'm going to go again where I told you to find the analysis tool pack, right? We go to data. We're going to use this a couple of times, so it's good to remember where this is. It's going to be under data. You find, if you loaded it now, right, you should see under analysis, we should have data analysis up there, right? So if you have this button there, you can click on that. And it gives you all the different tools that this add-in has available for you. Right? Right now, we want to find an average, which is part of the descriptive statistics, right? So that list that we just saw, if you're looking for any of those pieces of information, average, median, standard deviation, all of that can be given by descriptive statistics. So in that list, you look for descriptive statistics, hit OK. And again, you'll get another window asking you for the data that you want to work with, right? So here, we're going to go to input range, and we're going to select all of our data, right? All the pizzas, the number of pizzas sold per order, right? So that's the data that we're using. That's what we want to find the average for, right? So we're going to select all of those. I'm going to do Control Shift down. Now here, be careful because part of our table is the total. Very bottom of the table, we have the total. We don't want the total, right? We just want, that's not part of our data. So I'm just going to shift up there, right? So when I Control Shifted down and it brought me all the way to the very bottom, it highlighted the total. I don't want the total, so I'm just going to shift up and boom, it just goes up 1 and the total is not highlighted anymore, right? So as part of my input range, I should have all of those numbers of pizzas sold per order. Here is, in your data, you have a label at the very top, and you included that label in the highlighting. You would click on label in first row. Here, I didn't highlight the label, so I'm not going to check this. If you highlighted the label right now when you were selecting your data, then you can check that. But if you didn't highlight it, then just leave it blank. And we're going to put our output range to get to output this information in this worksheet. I'm going to put it right here, right next to our data. That's going to be our output. And here at the bottom, you have what do you want this function to give you, right? So we want the average. So that's going to be the summary statistics. If you want any more of this information, right, the confidence interval, the k largest entry or the k smallest entry, you can choose what number to give it, right? If you want the first largest, it's just a maximum. Second largest, right below the maximum, and so on. You can choose those. Just select any cell around here where you want to put your data. I just put it a couple columns next to our data. And so here, what we're really interested in is the summary statistics. So let's do that. That's really the main point of using descriptive statistics. Right? So it gives you all of this information that we talked about for the number of pizzas sold per order. So we can see here, on average, we sold 2.3 pizzas. Right? So you were saying, well, I want to have enough ovens to make 2.5 pizzas, right? Then maybe you might want to get 2, right? If one oven makes 2 pizzas, let's say, then maybe you want to have 2 ovens to be sure. But on average, we know we're selling 2.3 pizzas. And we have the error, the median, right? So the median is going to be the middle number in your data, which again, here we have it close to the average. So our data is not very skewed. And so this gives you a lot of information about that data that you have, right? Any questions so far? Okay, great. So that answers that question, right? But let's say we want to know how many ovens we need to buy for this. So let's say we know the average is 2.3 pizzas. But let's say we want to look at the distribution of these numbers, right? So if the average is at 2.3, right, we know that's where on our curve, that's where it's going to be the tallest, right? But we want to see where's the rest of the curve going, right? How much, like, is 90% of my data around the 2, right? Am I getting like a lot of big orders or not? Right, so let's take a look now at what comes next is the histogram, right? This is another tool that this analysis tool pack gives to you that you can use on your data, right? So histogram, right, it tells you the distribution of your data, and it gives you values for the frequency of your data, right? So it tells you how many times a certain value appears in your data. So let's make a histogram for the data that we have right now. Right? So again, if you forget any of this, it's all in the PowerPoint. There's a lot of detailed steps here for you to be able to follow along, but we're gonna do it over on the Excel sheet. So I'm gonna go down here. One of the first thing that you have to do for the histogram is before you actually use the tool, you need to make a bin, right? So the bin, we take a look at this example histogram over here. The bin is these numbers at the bottom, right? These ranges that you're going to choose these for your data, right? So you want to see, in this case, if we have our number of pizzas, right? We might want to start with how many orders were for 1 pizza, 2 pizzas, 3 pizzas, 4 pizzas, and so on, right? So we're going to choose these numbers based on the data set that we have, right? We have a lot of small numbers, so we're going to put a lot in the smaller range. So somewhere on your sheet there on the side, just make a bin. I'm going to label it bin. And we're going to make a list here for the values that we want to see on the histogram, right? If I take a look at this data right here, just from taking a quick look, we see there's a lot of 1s, 2s, there's a couple 4s, 3. There's a few high numbers that we have 11 here, but overall it looks like we're mostly 1, 2, 3, and 4, right? So for my bin, I'm going to put 1, 2, 3, and 4. Those seem to be very important in this data. So I want to take a look at how many 1, 2, 3s, and 4s I have there. And then I'll just pick a couple more numbers, like let's go up to 10 now. Let's do 15 and then 20, just so we have a good spread of numbers. But once you have your bin, again, you go to Analysis Toolpack. You go to Histogram. And again, you get one of these command windows. The first thing is you want your data again. So here we're going to put the sum of quantity data, and don't forget to not include the total. The same way we did for the descriptive statistics. Do it the same way. Then we need a bin range, right? So now we need a bin range. So I'm going to go back up here where I had the bin. I'm just going to select all of these numbers for my bin. Perfect. So these numbers here are going to be the bin for the histogram. Now I want to output it, let's say down here. So I'm going to put output range. I'm just going to select this empty cell down here. And you have a few options here for your histogram, right? If you just did all of this right now and hit OK, it's going to give you a table with the bin that you gave it and the frequency for each of those numbers in the bin. I would recommend that you always choose here the chart output. right? So that way you're always going to get a graph for the histogram, right? The graph is usually the most useful part of the histogram, right? It makes it very easy to see what's going on with your data. So I would recommend if you're working with a histogram, choose this chart output at the very bottom. That way you get a graph as well, not just a table. And here, I'm gonna also include the cumulative percentage because I want to show you something about this data in particular. So I'm gonna choose a cumulative percentage. And so this is gonna give us a histogram with the cumulative percentage and with a graph. Right? So let's hit OK. And bam, this is the table histogram, and this is the graph. So let me bring the graph down a little bit. Take a look at both. Right? So we can see 8,000 of our orders were for one pizza. 6,000 were for two, 3,000 for three, and then another 3,000 for four. Right, so most of our pizzas are really in the 1 to 4 range. The cumulative percentage shows you how many of all of your orders are in that range, right? So 37% of our pizzas, of our orders were for one pizza. 67%, right, about 67 were for one or two pizzas. 81% were for one, two, or three pizzas. And we can see we capture almost all of our orders with four, right? At four, we're already at 96.4%, right? So almost 97% of our orders were for four pizzas. So that tells you if your ovens make two pizzas at a time, you buy two ovens, you're mostly covered, right? You're not going to get very many orders for more than four pizzas. And so that helps you make decisions for your company based on the data that you have. And the histogram also gives it to you in the form of a graph. So you can see most of our orders are at the very bottom, and then they start sloping down. And these yellow boxes here with the line, that's a percentage, right? So as we move up, this percentage is going to go up to 100 once we cover all of our data. Any questions here so far? So these are just two of the tools that this analysis tool pack has for you. I think we're about it's about 6:45. So I think I'll show you the XLOOKUP function. And if we have time, we'll go over the ANOVA. If not, we can stop for questions and go over anything that you may want to know specifically. So let's take a look at our presentation. So we covered histograms, another good tool that you have as part of the analysis tool pack. So let's take a look now at the XLOOKUP function. So this one's going to be very useful, especially I think for presenting data. This function lets you go through your data and pull something out from it, right? So it's like a search function, right? It helps, and it's in the name, right? Lookup. It goes through your data and lets you pull out whatever it is that you're interested in. This is incredibly useful if you have a large data set like the one that we have over here, right? We have 48,000 rows. We don't want to go through all of that to find what we're looking for. We can make a very useful function with this XLOOKUP. Right? And like I was saying earlier, it actually does the job of two old Excel functions, VLOOKUP and HLOOKUP, and you can replace both of those with just XLOOKUP. So the question here is, let's get the pizzas sold for a specific order number, right? So let's say we want to know how many pizzas were in order number 1,000, right? If you don't want to go through your data, you want to just have a quick, easy drop down there where you choose the order and it tells you how many pizzas were in that order. We can use this XLOOKUP function. Right? So let's take a look at that. So I'm going to make a little table over here for pizzas sold. Let me merge these two so it looks a little neat. Merge. Let's make it bold. Let's add a line at the bottom. So here we're going to make a little function where we can choose the order number. Right, so I want to give this function an order number. We're going to put here on the side, and I want it to give me how much there? Okay, there we go. So down here, I'm going to put the order number, and I want it to give me. Okay. So again, we want to give this an order number, and down here, we want to get how many pizzas were sold in that specific order, right? Something that will be useful in case here, it's easy to just call an order because all of our orders are labeled by numbers, right? If you have some data set that's labeled by names, right, and you want to look for a particular name, maybe you don't know how it's spelled exactly. Something that useful that you can do here is just make this a drop-down menu, right? So that you don't have to type in the order number yourself, right? Just make it a drop-down menu and you can select an order from the menu, or in a different case, maybe a name, right? So to do that, so went too quick there. So to do that, just check the box, right? This is the box that we want to put our order number in, and go up to data validation, right? On data validation, it's a little, it has a box with a check mark and a box with an X on it if you don't have the full name there. Sometimes it only comes out as the symbol. Box with a check mark and a box with an X on it. Under data, right? This is the data tab. So you go to that data validation, and this is going to allow you to choose what type of entries go into that box, right? So here, we want to use entries from a list, right? So we just want to make it so that you can only put entries from whatever list we choose into that box, right? Nothing else. And here, the source, we're going to choose the order numbers, right? So these are the ones that we're interested in. So we're going to choose all of these and unselect the total. So these are the numbers for every order that we have, right? So we're going to select those and click OK. Now, when we go up here, we have a drop-down menu here, right? You can click on that little arrow and choose the order that you want to look up. So let's say I want to look up order number 11, I would put it there. If did you use a shift control to go down? Then just hold shift and go up once without the control. So now what we want it, now we're going to use the XLOOKUP function, right? We want in this box for it to give us the amount of pizza sold for the order number that we have at the top there. Right? So we're going to use the XLOOKUP function. Should pop up immediately there for you, so you can just select XLOOKUP. And you can see the arguments that go into this function right here, right? The first three are mandatory. After that, there's a couple more options that you can use for more advanced information, but we're just going to use the first three right now, right? The first thing that you have to put in is what you're looking up, right? So what you're looking for in the data that you have. We're looking for this particular order number, right? So the first thing we're going to put in this function is going to be this box up here. Whatever's in that box, right? That's what we're going to look up. So whatever order number is in there, that's what we're looking up with our function. So select that box and then comma, right? We go to our next argument. Here is the range where we are going to be looking, right? So where are we looking for that order number? So we're going to look for that in the list of order numbers that we have. Right? So for the second argument, we're going to select our list of order numbers. Again, unselect the total. So that is going to be your second argument. So press comma, so that's done. Now I'm just going to go back up. And so for our third argument, that's where you want to return what you find, right? So I'm looking for whatever order number is up here. I'm looking for that in this list of order numbers. I changed something right here. Highlight it up there. All right, I'll see right now. I don't think anything's wrong. Kind of weird that this is highlighted. I don't see why. But so we're looking for the other order number that is up here, and we're going to look for it in this list of numbers. When we find it, so let's say I'm looking for number 11, so that's going to be down here. I want it to give me this 4 over here. And I want it to give me the number of pizzas sold in that order number. So for the third argument, we're going to select the list or the number of pizzas sold. Again, unselect the total. And we can close our function with a parenthesis. Those are our 3 arguments. So it's, you see, I close the function, it's working already. It gives me 4, right? There were 4 pizzas sold in order number 11. And you can use your little drop-down menu here to look for whatever order you're interested in. But if you see number 9 has 9 pizzas, so let's select number 9, and look, it gives me 9 pizzas. So this is a very useful functionality that you can do with an XLOOKUP function. You can make a little table, and whatever it is that you're interested in, you can make a drop-down menu for it. And with the XLOOKUP function, it just gives you whatever output you have for what you're looking for. So it's almost 7. Unfortunately, I didn't get through the whole thing, but we just missed one thing, right? We just missed the ANOVA. So this is what we went over. The last thing that I wanted to go over was this ANOVA, analysis of variance. It's a statistical technique that you use to tell if there are differences in the mean of different samples of data. If you look through this presentation, you should be able to follow along with it pretty well. I made steps for every single thing. So if you want to check that out on your own at home, you can go over this information here. And so I want to see if you guys, we have a little bit of time to see if anybody has any questions over anything that we went over, anything that we didn't go over that you have any questions for. Anybody have any questions? Yeah, so it looks like you probably have a different version of Excel. One thing that you can do there is do this. Just replace the X with a V, and it should work the same way. Maybe not. Let me see. Let me do it down here with the VLOOKUP and see if it. Okay. Yeah, so the difference with the VLOOKUP is going to be instead of selecting the input and the output, you're just going to select the whole table. So, so it should look on the left and give you what's on the right. So let me see. Oh, okay. Give me a second. We look up first this, that table. Yeah, so that's probably because the XLOOKUP is a pretty new function, so you probably just have a different version and it's not is it? Um I have to refresh here. I'm not sure what's going on with the VLOOKUP. So that should be this. Yeah. So yeah, that one's pretty new. So you probably just need a newer version of Excel. But yeah, like Tano said, it's available to you as a student, and I would recommend getting that. And then you should be able to use this function the same way. Any other questions? Anything anybody had trouble with? Okay, well, if nobody has any questions, then I guess that will be it. Again, the presentation is there for you. I've tried to put in as much detail so you can follow it along at home as well. So if you want to go back over anything, it's there for you. And I recommend again that you check out Kaggle. It's a very good source for data sets and code that other people have uploaded. So it's a really cool place to go if you're trying to get more practice with this kind of thing.